Well, we've certainly had some fun with the last 3 cards. It's been a barrel of laughs here at Kippy's Quest, but all good things must come to an end, and it's finally time to move on to the court cards. The Page of Swords is a card of youthfulness, being an all-round clever clogs and keeping a watchful eye on people. And of course we've still got the truthful and intellectual aspects, just as we have with all the cards in this suit. Waite says a lithe, active figure holds a sword upright in both hands while in the act of swift walking. He's passing over rugged land, and about his way the clouds are collocated wildly. He's alert and lithe, looking this way and that, as if an expected enemy might appear at any moment. So as we're in the suit of swords, we've got that intellectual and curious attitude. Someone who's open to a fresh perspective, but also someone who's cautious of being deceived or misinformed in some way. It's a bit of a departure from the Monty Python image we saw in the last suit, where the page has got a fish poking out of his cup. We've still got the whole youthful aspect, but that card represents the emotional side and the concept of ideas taking form. The Page of Swords is more concerned with using his intellect to solve problems. So finding new and creative ways to deal with conflict would be a good way to describe this particular page. That puts me in mind of the idea of emotional intelligence. The definition of that is the capacity to be aware of, control and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. I think a big part of that comes from being able to see another person's point of view when it comes to a disagreement. It's very easy to get defensive whenever we find ourselves being challenged in some way, and then before we know it, we're off like a bull at a gate. If we're emotionally intelligent, then we can recognise those instincts within us that can make us fly off the handle over something, so self-awareness is the key here. Also, the ability to understand other people's feelings and perspectives can be a powerful tool when it comes to dealing with conflict, so that would be social awareness. Another aspect is having the ability to rise above it, rather than sinking down to the levels of negativity and antagonism. Rachel Pollack says a much lighter card than the other court swords. Yes! The page represents a very different approach to problems than the knight. Stay tuned for that one. Rather than charge them, he finds it sufficient to simply get above them, to find high ground. Now, I've talked before about how Crowley went for a different naming convention when it came to the chord cards in the Thoth deck. In the Waite-Smith Tarot, we've got kings, queens, knights and pages, which is the same structure as the Tarot de Marseille. The Thoth deck went with knights, queens, princes and princesses, which lined up with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's Tarot. Now, we can speculate all day about which chord card is equivalent to which in the 2 different decks, but on this channel we're sticking with the relative positions on the Zodiac wheel. That puts the pages and princesses in the same position. So the princess in the Thoth deck is another crazy looking one. Crowley says she represents to some extent the anger of the gods, and she appears helmed with the serpent-haired Medusa for her crest.
Medusa? Is that like a fruit juicer?
A brief history of Medusa.
In Greek mythology, Medusa was one of the 3 Gorgon sisters. These were 3 female monsters who had the ability to turn anyone who looked at them to stone.
First I was afraid, then I was petrified.
The Gorgons are generally depicted as women with living snakes in place of their hair, but Medusa was the only mortal of the 3 sisters. Because of this, she was beheaded by Perseus, who was sent to kill Medusa and given the mirrored shield of Athena so he wouldn't need to look directly at her.
He won't even look me in the eye!
It's because she keeps objectifying people.
Getting back to the Thoth card, Crowley says she stands in front of a barren altar as if to avenge its profanation, and she stabs downward with her sword. The heaven and the clouds, which are her home, seem angry. So I think we're talking about someone who's a bit mardy by the sound of it. Don't know why, but she's definitely got her arse in her hand about something. Milo Duquette says rising out of a cloud of dust, Crowley's paradoxical Princess of Swords, Earth of Air, appears like a beautiful avenging angel. Her head is crowned with a Medusa-headed helmet, which mercifully is turned away from our view. The Sforza and Marseille cards are pretty straightforward, if a little awkward looking. The Solar Busker page is looking well chilled out, just standing there playing his lute.
He's probably playing Mac the Knife.
Ow! Everyone spies, looks for a way to encroach on his neighbour. One no longer relies on goodwill.
I don't spy on my neighbours. Are they spying on me?
Let us at least try to settle on a sum, however small it may be.
What? I've got to bribe them into not spying on me? This suit just gets worse every week.
The Hermetic title for the Page and Princess of Swords is Princess of the Rushing Winds.
Rushing winds and breezes is a bit of an ongoing theme in this suit, so brace yourself for plenty of fart gags. The other titles for the card are Lotus of the Palace of Air, Princess and Empress of the Sylphs and Sylphides, and Throne of the Ace of Swords. So we're going back to the elemental spirits of 16th century alchemist Paracelsus for this part of the tarot, as we do for all of the core cards. So far we've had Salamanders for the suit of Wands, Undines or Water Nymphs for the suit of Cups, and now we've got Sylphs for the suit of Swords. Too many S's. So a sylph is a spirit of the air, and was described by Paracelsus as human-like and spirit-like in nature, but they do not fully belong to either realm. We see sylphs turning up in all kinds of folklore and stories, from Shakespeare all the way up to Pokemon. Lotus of the Palace of Air sounds like a palace floating in the sky. The Throne of the Ace of Swords title refers to the connection between the page and the ace that we find in each suit. We'll be getting to that in the next two sections.
In the same way as the Ace, the Page and Princess of Cups take up the 90 degrees of the zodiac wheel that incorporates Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces.
So we're back to eating a full quarter of the zodiac pizza, just like we did with the Ace at the beginning of the suit. That gives us Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces, with Aquarius in the centre as the fixed sign of the element of air. Now some people prefer to just stick with the three air signs for this one, so that would be Gemini, Libra and Aquarius. We've seen those signs cropping up throughout the suit because the swords represent the element of air, so if that's how you want to do it, then fill your boots. However, and I'm going to sound like a broken record again, this is a ritual magic channel, so we're sticking with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn correspondences. That means while the pip cards and the other cards represent quadrants of time on the zodiac wheel, the pages and the aces represent quadrants of space. In the case of the suit of swords, that space covers the celestial area above the North Pole and the Americas. For this reason, I haven't got any celebrities to bring up for the pages. What we can say is that Capricorns are often diligent in their pursuits, Aquarians are known for their innovative thinking, and Pisceans can be intuitive and empathetic. All these qualities fit really well with the Page of Swords and his desire to learn, explore new ideas and show empathy to people.
The Page of Swords resides in the world of Yetzirah, and sits at the 10th Sephira of Malkut, together with the 10 of Swords.
So we're staying at Malkut for this one, and we're still in the area and intellectual world of Yetzirah. Now I've talked at great length about the connection between the pages and the aces, and I think the Tree of Life is where that becomes really apparent. We've got the aces up in Keter right at the very top of the tree, which is the Sephira of divinity and potential. On the opposite end, we've got the pages residing at Malkut, which is the Sephira of the material plane. That gives us a direct connection straight down the middle pillar between the divine and the manifest. We can view that as the journey that an idea takes, from divine inspiration all the way down to practical manifestation in the world around us. In this sense, we could say that the pages act as the conduit through which the energy of the aces is expressed in a solid and tangible way. According to Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, the 10th name is Adonai Melech, that is Lord and King. His numeration is Malkut, that is Kingdom and Empire, and signifieth the church, temple of God, and a gate.
The Page of Swords herb is dill. As well as being a common ingredient in pickles, dill is also used in tea for digestive upsets.
What did the pickle say to the cat?
I don't know, what did the pickle say to the cat?
Nothing. Pickles can't talk.
Is that a joke or a statement?
But what does it all mean?
So we've got the usual meanings for the Page of Swords, as we have for all the pages, those being youthfulness, enthusiasm and new beginnings. When we bring the swords energy to the page, that adds the intellectual aspect, so a good time to start planning and thinking a new project through in a practical sense. Thinking outside the box and coming up with creative solutions is another important aspect. There's also the cautious and watchful element to this card. Waite says authority, overseeing, secret service, vigilance, spying, examination and the qualities thereto belonging. So talk of spying and secret service immediately conjures up images of James Bond. But I think we can view that as a desire to watch a situation from the distance and not get too involved. The page can also be a bit of a smart arse. You know, the kind of person who gets a bit over intellectual and likes to show off about it. Talking behind other people's backs is another aspect, so being a bit of a gossip ties in with this card. Earlier I talked about the page's ability to rise above a situation and distance himself from it. Rachel Pollack says instead of solving conflicts or meeting opposition, he detaches himself. If the situation is one that calls for such an easygoing approach, then the page's unattached attitude is very beneficial. So often it can be a really good idea to remove yourself from a conflict if it's turning nasty. Sometimes an argument just can't be resolved in the moment, with all heightened emotions running rampant, and the best thing you can do is just walk away until everyone's calmed down. However, we can't stay like that forever. At some point we're going to have to deal with the situation, or we'll just end up ostracizing ourselves from everybody. Pollack goes on to say, but if a more difficult problem is involved, then the page's practice becomes hard to maintain. It requires vigilance, to use Waite's term, making sure that people or situations don't get too close. Crowley had some very strong words to describe the Princess of Swords. He says the character of the princess is stern and revengeful, her logic is destructive, she's firm and aggressive, with great practical wisdom and subtlety in material things.
You are warned that a very curious man will seek to invite himself into your affairs in order to know your speculations.
Keep out of my speculations, curious man.
Oh.
When the Page of Swords appears reversed, it can mean that the cautious and watchful element has taken a bit of a sour turn. Waite says reversed, more evil side of these qualities, what is unforeseen, unprepared state. Sickness is also intimated. So when he talks about what is unforeseen, I think he's referring to someone becoming overly suspicious about other people and their motives. This is obviously bad news in a relationship where trust and openness are what we need. Rachel Pollack says here we see the effect of the Page's aloof attitude in a situation that requires more force. The vigilance turns to paranoia. Everyone appears to be an enemy. Crowley already had a pretty strong definition for the princess, but he goes one step further when she's having a bad day. He says if ill-dignified, all these qualities are dispersed. She becomes incoherent, and all her gifts tend to combine to form a species of low cunning, whose object is unworthy of the means.
If it appears in the reverse, you will receive news.
Oh, that's bound to be good news if it's in the suit of swords. It's been nothing but joy and happiness all the way. The big takeaway for the Page of Swords is an eagerness to solve problems by using our intellect. Work smarter, not harder is a good phrase to go with this one. However, we've also got to be mindful of the watchful aspect of this card and not allow that to get in the way of our lives or relationships. Alexander Dumas once said, pure love and suspicion cannot dwell together. At the door where the latter enters, the former makes its exit.
Don't go spying on each other. It's very unbecoming. May the coming days bring you the resolve to tackle problems head on instead of lurking about in the bushes like a pervert. Until next time.